15 News with Kim Anderson, Greg Peterson, and Chief Meteorologist Chris Dunn.
The city of Mobile has been declared a Purple Heart City.
And the city has a large decorated veteran population, including many Purple Heart recipients.
And the city wanted to show its gratitude to the men and women who have served in the military with a proclamation naming Mobile a Purple Heart City.
This proclamation today, I think, especially honors those that, in Abraham Lincoln's words, gave that last full measure of devotion. Also honors those who put themselves in harm's way in order to protect the liberty and the freedom of their fellow citizens.
Just last week, Spanish Fort also gave a proclamation declaring the city a Purple Heart City.
Council got a visit from some American heroes today. As News 5's Bill Riles reports, council members hope the rest of the city will make this special segment of our veterans community, those who've won the Purple Heart after being wounded in combat, feel especially good about living in Mobile.
City Councilman John Williams sponsored the proclamation that would make Mobile a Purple Heart City.
This is an awesome thing, and this is just another one of those recognitions of this great military community.
With a relatively large population of veterans who live in Mobile and along the Gulf Coast, it stands to reason there's a relatively large group of people who've also been wounded in combat.
We have a very large number of Mobile citizens who have won the Purple Heart in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and then the Gulf Wars.
And we want the people to know that our city supports those who have gone in harm's way.
The Purple Heart is the oldest military decoration in use today. It actually stretches back to the time of General George Washington. The military ordered the Purple Heart as one organization behind this move to get cities to recognize their Purple Heart citizens. And they plan to expand the effort to other cities along the Gulf Coast, including Daphne and Fairhope. In Mobile, Bill Riles, News 5.
Yes, sir.
First of all, I think y'all may have noticed that there is a distinguished group to your right, to my left, who I am honored to represent, not only on the council, but as a veteran in this community. It just makes me very proud. And before I go into any other comments, I would like to ask Dr. Barry Booth to make a couple of comments, if you'll allow it.
Good morning, Council, and good morning, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your past support of the initiatives which included the Honor Flight South Alabama regarding veterans, World War II veterans, and what a compliment it was for Colonel John, Miss Gina, and Miss Bess to be available when that plane door opened to greet those World War II heroes. They still talk about it.
Oh, that's fun.
Secondly, I want to thank you for your support of the directional sign program for one of the jewels of South Alabama, and that's the Alabama State Veterans Memorial Cemetery at Spanish Fort, as we refer to as Arlington South. The directional sign program was so successful it's eliminated the problems of out-of-towners being able to get to the cemetery and participate in the final salute for those people that have served our country. And for your information, and I know CJ understands this, we've had over 1,500 ceremonies at the cemetery and over 150,000 visitors. So it is truly a jewel in South Alabama, and wouldn't be that way if it weren't for the support of the city of Mobile. Also, would like to thank each of you that are present here today and those on the council for your family members that may have served or are serving now in the military around the world. And I want everybody to know that every single one of them is a volunteer. And never forget their families, because they are with them all the time. The Military Order of the Purple Heart is a congressionally chartered veterans organization whose members have received the Purple Heart given in the name of the President of the United States to any member of our armed forces who has been wounded or lost in combat. While clearly this is an individual decoration, the Purple Heart differs from all other military decorations in that the individual is not recommended for this award. They are entitled to it upon meeting certain criteria. Unlike my dental corps hooch mate in Vietnam, Dr. J.C. Bond, who was awarded the Purple Heart and an oak leaf cluster, meaning that he was wounded twice, I am not a recipient of this decoration. However, I enthusiastically support this distinguished order that promotes programs that include suicide prevention, help for veterans with brain injuries, counseling for post-traumatic stress disorder, and assistance for women's health issues. These are all common challenges for combat wounded veterans. The Order of the Purple Heart continues to offer services that aid all veterans and their families and continues to make significant contributions to all of our communities. The mission of being designated a Purple Heart City is to raise awareness and to honor those of our community that are recipients of this very special award. We thank you for considering and deciding to proclaim this honor to our veterans and to honor the city of Mobile. I'd like to introduce now Colonel Jim Eubanks. Colonel Eubanks. Colonel Eubanks is a Korean War veteran, a two-tour veteran of Vietnam, a combat medic during the Korean conflict. He'd like to say a few words in thanks.
This is a particular honor for me to be here today. Back in the 1930s, I was a kid selling Mobile Press Register on the streets of Mobile and Dauphin, saying, extra, extra, read all about it. That was me. And my father was a Mobile City policeman. My mother was a waitress at the Battle House Hotel. So never in my wildest dreams did I think that some 70 years later I would be here addressing the mayor of our city and the city council and representing the people from the Purple Heart Association. You know, the Purple Heart quite often is given posthumously. And so this proclamation today, I think, especially honors those that, in Abraham Lincoln's words, gave that last full measure of devotion. Also honors those who put themselves in harm's way in order to protect the liberty and the freedom of their fellow citizens, some of whom suffered grievous wounds and their entire lives were changed as a result of that, not only them, but their families, their wives, their children. So it is a great honor for me to say to you, thank you so much for this proclamation. I think in my over 31 years of military service, most of the soldiers I knew were putting themselves in that harm's way with the idea that that was what they were doing to protect that liberty and freedom that we enjoy in this country. And what they really appreciate having is their fellow citizens knowing what they did and appreciating it. And I think that this proclamation is concrete evidence that the city of Mobile and the council and the mayor and their representatives of the citizens of Mobile recognize that. And so on their behalf, I say to you, thank you so much. We will honor it forever.
For everyone's, I'd like to see, will all the MPOH gentlemen stand, please? All the members of Chapter 2206 of the Purple Heart. You know, books and narratives can never explain what combat is. People that have never been there can never understand it. But for you to take the time to honor these gentlemen is terrific. They deserve every accolade that can be thrown their way. And you know, I failed to mention when I was speaking of the Honor Flight program, Chief Barber will always be Chief Barber to me, nothing else. But the Mobile Police Department did a fantastic job with supporting us also, and I want you to know that. Please pass that on to all those concerned. Okay.
What a great honor it is, Mr. Chairman, for me to, on behalf of the City Council and the Mayor, make the following proclamation. Whereas the Purple Heart was the first American Service Award made available to the common soldier and is specifically awarded to any member of the United States Armed Forces who was wounded or killed in combat with a declared enemy of the United States. And whereas it is the oldest decoration in present use and was initially created as the badge of military merit by General George Washington in 1782. And whereas the mission of the Military Order of the Purple Heart is to foster an environment of goodwill among combat wounded veterans and their families, promote patriotism, support legislation, and most importantly, make sure we never forget. And whereas in the Mobile metropolitan area, there is a large, highly decorated veteran population, including many Purple Heart recipients. And whereas the city of Mobile has great admiration for these men and women who have served our country and acknowledges our veterans who have paid the high price of freedom. Now, therefore, the members of the Mobile City Council, along with the mayor, do hereby proclaim Mobile, Alabama, Purple Heart City, and urge our citizens to show their appreciation for the sacrifices of the Purple Heart recipients have made in defending our freedom. Done this day in the city of Mobile. Colonel Jim. Mr. Chairman, that is it.
Just before we conclude, I'm going to ask again, can all recipients of the Purple Heart who are here today, can you please stand again? Thank you all so much for your service.